This is Corinne.
And this is Ayanni.
And you're listening to Sex, Love, Literature, a pop culture podcast where we take a semi-scholarly look at why
and how
the sex stuff in media matters.
This episode, on the recommendation of an SLL listener, we're excited to do a deep dive into the Japanese drama Rinko-San Wants to Try.
The thing she wants to try is having sex. We get into how the show complicates conceptions of virginity, plays with the friends with benefits trope, and maybe get in our feelings a little bit about a second female lead who really got under Ayanni's skin.
Yeah, I don't like her. If you want to recommend a text for us to discuss, let us know on Instagram, Twitter, or Threads at SexLoveLit.
And don't forget to subscribe and to rate our show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or any of your other favorite podcast platforms.
As a note, this episode was recorded during the 2023 WGA and SAG-AFTRA strikes. Without the labor of the writers and actors currently on strike, along with their counterparts in other industries and countries who also deserve fair wages and labor protections, none of the work we discuss here or in other episodes would exist.
All right, let's dive in.
Hello, SLL listeners. Welcome back to another episode of Sex, Love, Literature. As always, we are super excited to have you here listening to us, with us, kind of, today. So before we started recording, Corinne and I were chatting about what we should banter about before we got started. And
the pre-banter banter.
The pre-banter, yes. And I was kind of drawing a blank because for the first time, I think we're very ahead on the recording of our episodes. We're recording this in early September. It's Labor Day today, so that's kind of exciting, taking our day off to do some podcasting. But you're not going to hear this episode until October, so you'll be in a completely different season. It'll be like a month and a half later almost. So I don't know. Bantering about now feels a little weird because it's going to be later.
I mean, yeah, we're kind of a little bit like removing that like layer of remove that like pretends that we record something and then you immediately get to hear it. That's never true. But now it's even like less true because we're telling you how far in advance we recorded this.
Yeah, and I guess it matters less when like someone listens to the episode a year later. They don't know. There's been a lot of time passing, but it just feels kind of I don't know. I was like, we could banter about the beginning of the semester, but by the time you listen to it, you'll be like, Ayanni, the semester
It's the middle of
like
the semester.
Yeah.
Like midterms are happening.
Oh, God. Oh, but then you say that. I'm like, don't advance their lives, though. Like, it feels so far away. Not that I have to deal with midterms, but like, you will.
I mean,
No.
I have to grade papers.
Okay.
But
Okay. So midterm grading. But not, let's not start our podcast talking about grading, though. We'll ruin everybody's mood. So why don't we just slide right in to our favorite segment? What's sparking joy? Corinne, what is What's Sparking Joy?
What's Sparking Joy is when we talk about a piece of pop culture that we are watching, reading, or listening to that is currently sparking joy for us. So, Ayanni, what is sparking joy for you?
What's sparking joy for me, and has been sparking joy for me for a very long time, is New Jeans. But very specifically, pop
okay,
culture
first of all,
happy
what
hour.
is New Jeans?
If people listening to this show don't know what New Jeans is, I can't help them. No, I'm kidding. New Jeans is a relatively new K-pop girl group that has kind of exploded in popularity over the last year. They released their first single Attention, back in
2022, I think.
Yeah, and it was maybe summer 2022, and apparently there was no fanfare. It just dropped, and people were like, what is this? It's amazing. And then they dropped another single shortly after that, and then dropped their first EP. And due to a variety of reasons, especially popularity on TikTok, New Jeans has kind of exploded. And I like them a lot. I think they're really fun. And I did not realize they were all teenagers until I listened to an episode of Pop Culture Happy Hour that was put out on the 31st of August in 2023 that focused very much on the meteoric rise of new jeans, but also interestingly about how they're produced both as a group and their music production. And what I
Mhm.
realized, which I kind of had a feeling for, but it's nice to be acknowledged, is that the music is pulling a lot on some of my personal favorite genres of music. So there's a lot pulling on like old R&B, there's pulling on house music, there's pulling on dance music. And their newest single, what is it? Get Up, I think? Or not single, excuse me. Their newest EP pulls a lot on like 90s dance music and early
Mhm.
2000s stuff. There's one song that they talk about in the Pop Culture Happy Hour episode that could have been a Craig David song. And I was like, oh, throw me back to being a young teenager in like 2000. My goodness. So I don't know. It was really interesting to kind of hear this take from music experts on New
Mhm.
Jeans and what they're doing in their production. And it kind of gave me a more nuanced appreciation beyond me just being like, hey, New Jeans makes me want to dance around my living room. And a more nuanced appreciation of kind of the work that is going into like how the group is being put together. So that sparked a lot of joy for me. And it's a good episode. So if you like New Jeans, I highly recommend listening to it. You and Corinne's the one that told me I should listen to it in the first place. So shout out to you, Corinne, for sparking joy for me.
Yeah, I am a longtime pop culture happy hour listener. I think since 2014 when I lived in Poland and like wanted to hear American accents. That's really when I started listening to podcasts.
It's funny. I always think of a pop culture happy hour as like the patron saint of our show. You know, we look up to
Yeah,
them in a lot of ways.
a lot of our bones, I don't know, that's a weird way to put it, but a lot of like our foundation as a podcast comes from me being like, well, they do this on PCHH. What should we do?
I know you balked at Bones, but I kind of like yes, all Bones, a pop culture happy hour. It's kind of macabre. I kind of like it.
Bones, roots, foundation, whatever metaphor we want to go with. Anyway, I'm going to talk about what's sparking joy for me now.
Go for it.
So that is the K-drama My Dearest. The first half, so the first 10 episodes aired mostly in August, and the second half, so the second 10 episodes are supposed to air sometime in October. So as you listen to this, part 2 of My Dearest either will be about to air or will have just started airing. It is a historical K-drama set starting in about 1636. So,
Hmm.
with the Qing invasion of Joseon, which I now have done research on because I wanted to know more context. But it's this sort of epic romance that's happening against this backdrop of war and invasion. And the two main actors are so, so, so good. I wasn't familiar with the main actor before. His name is Nam Kung Min, but I have seen the main actress. Her name is An Eun Jin in Hospital Playlist before, and she is so so good. Honestly, the main actor is also amazing. Their chemistry is really good, but they have this very
Mm.
will they won't they push and pull relationship that is super fascinating to watch. And the show is also taking a lot of I don't want to say it's an adaptation of Gone with the Wind, but it is pulling a
Hmm.
lot of cues from like that romance and something that is very yeah, you're making a face, Ayanni.
No, yeah, I was just curious, like in what way?
In the way that they meet each other and this and in their romantic relationship happening against this backdrop of war. So
Mm.
because the Gone with the Wind happens a lot against the backdrop of like the Civil War and
Mhm.
is
Mhm.
it's potentially problematic to put it very mildly in its Confederacy and slavery apologisms.
Mm,
But
welp.
this drama does not have that going on. But it does
Oh,
have
yeah,
that
that
same
would be from left field.
but it does have that sort of sweeping, possibly doomed from the start romantic relationship that is very, very compelling. And something that has been really
Mm.
interesting because I just watched the 10th episode, so the one before the break, and everyone is extremely angry at the female lead. for a choice that she made, but I'm just like, this isn't the end. This is intermission. What did you expect them to let us sit comfortably during this time? Like, that was never gonna happen.
So you mean everyone, like, outside of the show, not everyone in the show
Oh
is
yeah,
mad?
everyone outside of the show. Also, everyone in the show is also very upset.
Oh, so just everybody's pissed, apparently. Okay.
Everybody's like not doing well. I mean, Gilche, the character, didn't have any good choices available to her. And
Mm.
something that is so interesting to me about her as a character, she's almost more interesting to me than the male lead, is that she's like in her small village, she's a noblewoman, but she is such a flirt and has like all of the men in love with her
Mm.
and like plays everyone like a fiddle until the main guy comes to town and he's like a merchant bad boy kind of figure. And so
Mm, mhm.
she can't like wrap him around her little finger in the same way.
Ah, okay.
But part of that is because she's so smart that she's like bored. So then when the war comes and she
Hmm.
actually has to like do things to like survive with like her bestie and her maid and her bestie's maid, they like she is the one who like will take the knife and like kill the invader. Like,
Ah, okay, okay, okay.
so she, if you give her a little bit too much rope, she might hang herself. But if she has enough going on, then she's the one that you should turn to in a pinch. So that is
Okay.
very fun for me.
I can see why this sparks joy for you, TBH. Like, this is right up your alley in a lot of ways.
Yeah, so Sparking Joy for Me, My Dearest, currently available on Viki, and yeah, highly recommend looking forward, checking out if you're into historicals or epic romance, and especially both.
And that has been another fantastic round of What's Sparking Joy, in which joy was sparked. We were happy. And also both talked about things in August. So once again, I am reminded that this episode will come out much later than when we were
Okay,
recording it.
I was looking forward to the second half of My Dearest dropping.
No, no,
I
no.
thought about
Oh,
time.
not to malign your thinking, Corinne. My deepest apologies.
I mean, I'm also watching like 2 or 3 other K-dramas and 2 C-dramas, so like I didn't mention those
Well, you just did though.
by name.
Oh, okay. By name, yes. So, actually, that's a good place to kind of swing into what we are talking about today because we're mixing things up a little bit. We're not talking about a K drama, we're not talking about a C drama. Today, we are talking about a J drama, which is a Japanese drama.
Yay!
So, I'm excited because that means I can actually kind of pronounce people's names. Um, so, we are going to be talking about the Japanese drama Rinko-San Wants to Try, which we watched on Viki. It's a lot of fun. I think we have a lot of very interesting things to say about it. So I'll dive right into the summary so that we can get on with our conversation. To start, Rinko Amaki, played by Kaho Takara, is 27 years old and single. She works as a wedding planner and has been promoted to chief of wedding planners. She is recognized for her excellent work at her job and also as a person with a good heart. But she has a complex. That is, she is still a virgin. Meanwhile, her colleague,
Dun dun
Gen.
dun. Sorry, go on.
Meanwhile, her colleague, Gen Kamisaka, who's played by Shota Tosuka, is also 27 years old and single. He has the most contracts as a wedding planner. He is also very attractive. Rinko Amaki happens to know that Gen Kamisaka is also a virgin that she finds out through, let's say, some meddlesome mishaps. So Rinko invites Kamisaka to a love motel. So thank you, Asian Wiki, for that description that I technically had to reread a couple times. But the fun thing about this is that it's actually based on a web manga with the same name by Miho Fujita, which is a lot of fun. And we'll talk a little bit about how manga plays into the story itself. But as you can see, this kind of a story, this story particularly was right up our alley for having a
Mhm.
discussion. And if I'm not mistaken, this was recommended to us by one of our listeners, right?
Yeah, one of our listeners reached out on Instagram and was like, "Hey, so I saw this J drama and want to know what you think about it." And this was a while ago because we're behind on everything all the time. But we finally watched it. And so it is a pretty short drama, which I think is part of why I finally picked it up. Because it was like in the back of my mind for a while, but it's 8 episodes
Mm.
that are about 20 minutes long. So it's like really concise and was a good sort of break from some of the more epic tragedy that I have been mired in lately.
Oh yeah, completely different.
But yeah, so then I picked it up and was like, "Oh, this not only is this doing a lot with sex and virginity, it also plays with a lot of romantic tropes. So like love
Yep.
triangles, enemies slash rivals to lovers, friends with benefits, first love, and so on. So it packs a lot in there in those 8 episodes."
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And I think also because the episodes are short, it kind of pulls you along pretty
Hmm.
easily. It didn't feel like anything really dragged for me.
Yeah, I watched it. So Ayanni watched it spread out over about the course of a week, and I watched
Yeah.
it twice. But both times I watched all of it in one evening. So
Oh, I didn't realize the second time you watched it in one night too. Man, you're out here bragging. I've already passed you in my Rinko rewatch. That's because you watched it in one night, Corinne.
yeah, that's because it's very watchable in one night. I mean, eight
Oh,
twenty
okay.
minute episodes is not that much longer than like a movie. So
Hmm, I'm not going to argue that point, but I'll keep going. So, just to give a quick rundown of the major characters, we have Yoichi Hiyama, who's played by Kenta Izuka. He is the second male lead for the show.
hmm
He's a 30 something photographer whose good looks are like the talk of all of the staff at this wedding planning agency. But he's really interested in Rinko and really wants to date her and makes that known. I think he's interesting because he's a little bit older than the rest of the cast. Like, I don't, if I'm remembering correctly, he's not like 30. He's maybe like 33,
his
34.
character is 35.
He's 35, yeah. So definitively older than the rest of the cast, but not so much older that he's like out of appropriate dating range, let's say.
Hmm.
We also have Sonoko Kiba, who's played by Yoon, who I always appreciate an actor who has like just one name. But she's Rinko's bluntly honest best friend, who is kind of an interesting character. I don't know if she's fleshed out as much as we would like, but she's very to the point and wants the best for Rinko and will be kind of like, you're fucking up right now, right? You're being kind of ridiculous, and I appreciated that about her. We also have Naokuji, who's played by Hiroki Iijima. He's Kamisaka's best friend from high school who bartends at a local bar, which is called Bar Warm, which is an interesting name for a bar. And he likes to meddle. He sticks his nose into people's affairs, which I guess is kind of plays into the bartender trope in a way.
It's also he I think is also largely like a useful plot device. Like he's the reason that
Yeah.
Rinko finds out that Kamisaka is a virgin.
Yeah. And it's not meddling in a I don't know.
It's not in a malicious way. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's in a
Yeah, yeah,
like
yeah.
playful kind of way.
And because it's a rom-com, there are certain things that we kind of let slide that if it was real life, it'd be like, "Oh, that was way out of line, bro. You shouldn't just be talking about people's sexual lives with strangers. It's fine." And last but certainly not least, because I have a lot of feelings about her, we have Shiho Ino, who's played by Miwako Kake. And she's Kamisaka's high school crush and his first love, who is using the wedding planning services, and then causes a lot of meddlesome trouble. But we'll come back. We'll come back to Shiho. So, what are your first reactions? First thoughts on
So I do
Rinko-san?
actually before we dive into first reactions, I want to give a couple of caveats here.
Sure,
One
please.
is as always, this is not going to be a spoiler-free analysis. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
but again, because this is like a pretty brief rom-com, you can, when you watch it, you already kind of know where it's going anyway, so that
Mhm,
won't
mhm, mhm.
necessarily take away from your enjoyment, but if you'd rather go in spoiler free, we like it, we recommend it, you can watch it and come back. And the second thing, which is always the case, is that we are two American women
Yes.
and we are coming from an American cultural context. So while we are analyzing a J drama and looking at the text for what it is, we are not necessarily familiar with like the specifics of Japanese culture and are looking at it from our more Western lens. So always the case, but something I just wanted to make sure was clear up front.
Awesome. So, Corinne, what are your first reactions to Rinko-san?
So I thought this drama was super charming. The first
Mm,
time, so I've watched it twice. Very normal. I mean, that is actually very normal academic behavior. I don't know that it's normal
yes.
casual viewer behavior.
Well, I mean, the show straddles the line between those two, so I'm gonna give
Yes.
you the benefit of the doubt here.
But yeah, I thought it was super charming. I thought Rinko was very, very funny. I
Yeah.
think particularly the second time through, I appreciated how comedic, particularly with physical humor, the actress was, and like how
Mm.
she used her body and like how she walked and like a lot of her very sort of over the top facial reactions.
Mhm,
I
mhm.
thought the romance was compelling, and I also thought it was, kind of hot. So, uh, yeah, I enjoyed it. It was fun enough that I watched it and was like, hey, Ayanni, I know I'm already making you watch something for the podcast, but can I make you watch something else?
And honestly, it was pretty easy to pick up when you made that suggestion. So I also really enjoyed the show. I enjoyed Rinko-san a lot. I think for me, a lot of the driver was Rinko as a character. I thought she was a
Mm-hmm.
lot of fun to follow and a lot of fun to have as a POV character. And she also kind of reminded me of my favorite Japanese singer, Utada, a little bit. So I was perhaps a little already biased in her favor. But Wrinkle was, I think, a really compelling rom-com heroine to follow and to pay attention
Mm-hmm.
to, and I was thusly interested in her exploits. I how do I wanna put this? Because I kind of already knew where I wanted it to go, sometimes I think I got more annoyed with some of the other characters and perhaps necessary, but that's because, as you said, it's I don't necessarily think from a plot standpoint they're trying to do anything new and exciting, which I don't think they have to. I don't think every
Mm-hmm.
show needs to like completely surprise you when it comes to the plot. I think they're doing some other interesting things when it comes to how we think about sex and sexuality, right? But it made me I text Corinne angrily, kind of like, "No, why is she bothering with Mr. Hyama? She needs to just go be with Kamisaka-kun and be happy because I know that's what's coming and that's what they need to do and stop stressing me
Mm-hmm.
out." So it's interesting watching this kind of after we did hit the spot, I wanna say, last year,
Mm-hmm.
because I think they occupy an interesting similar space of kind of like, I'll just, for lack of better term, say, like, slightly smutty rom-com, right?
Slightly slutty rom-com that's more short form
Smutty, not
content.
slutty.
Yeah. I think I meant to say smutty. I don't know what I said.
Okay.
But yeah, that sort of like slightly smutty rom-com where you know where things are going, but the interesting part is how they are going to get there.
Yeah. Mhm, mhm. So, yeah, I think it was interesting to have that as a comparison point, but to see how Rinko-san stands on its own. And also, this is one that I made the decision that I should just watch it on my iPad in my bedroom at night and not in the living room. I think it's interesting because Bridgerton, I feel like I can get away with watching, like, on the TV,
Oh, interesting.
but
Because I think Bridgerton I would consider Bridgerton way more explicit.
I think so. And that's perhaps something I need to unpack for me, but, like, with Rinko-san, I made the decision that this was gonna be something that I watched before bed just so that I, wasn't in the middle. So, those are kind of my initial thoughts to it. I did really like it, though. I'm glad that we made the decision to do the show on this because I don't know if I would have watched it otherwise.
Mhm. So, thinking then about some of the themes that this drama focused on and kind of brought to the surface, I kind of want to start us off by talking about this may be obvious, but virginity and how the
Oh,
show
no
is
one saw that
using
coming.
No one at all. But I mean, the
Nobody.
way that the show is thinking about virginity and showing how particularly how these characters are thinking about virginity, I think is very
Mhm, mhm,
interesting. Like our introduction to Rinko is as this 27-year-old woman who like essentially who
mhm.
has it all basically. She's great at her job, she's hot, she has a lot of friends or at least enough friends. Her career
Right.
is like taking off. She's very, very put together. Everyone at work thinks she's perfect, but she feels this pressure because she lacks, as she puts it, like standing on the balcony, like yelling to the world, like not necessarily literally, but that because she lacks sexual experience, that she doesn't have it all. Like that is like the
Right.
quote missing puzzle piece in her life.
Yeah. The puzzle motif actually was really interesting running throughout the show.
Mhm.
Because even in the opening, it was kind of like puzzle pieces coming together. So Rinko is a little, I don't want to say obsessed. That makes it sound negative, but she's a little hung up on these pieces of her life that she feels are
Mhm.
missing. And the fact that she, in her own words, has no sexual experience is something that she feels makes her lacking, right? That
Mhm.
leaves her wanting of this kind of perfect ideal of womanhood. I won't even say femininity because I think it's more like this is the kind of woman that I want to be, and the kind of woman I want to be has sexual experience, which I think is
Well,
interesting.
and I do think it's so like comparing and a comparison that comes up is like between Rinko and Shiho, the second female lead, is that Rinko feels this expectation not only just to have sexual experience, but also to be like good at sex. Because like she
Mhm.
has a
Mhm.
crush on Hiyama, who ends up being the second male lead, and she overhears him talking to another character, like a side throwaway character, about how he
Right.
like prefers like a more mature, experienced woman, and she's like, "Oh, no, like, I don't have any experience," like, it and then, like, when he asks her out later, she, like, runs away essentially because she's like, "I will be a disappointment because of the kind of person that I am. He expects me to be great at this, and
Mhm.
I don't know what I'm doing, and I never don't know what I'm doing, so, like, I have to know."
And the thing that was really funny for that sequence for me is I did not take when he said a mature, experienced woman to actually mean sex. I took it to mean like life experiences. Like you've
Mhm.
gone out and you've gone places and you've met interesting people. However, the young lady that he was speaking to was very convinced that he means sex. And she was like, oh, I have plenty of experiences, which then, of course, causes Rinko to have a panic attack. So yeah, and this is something that I think has come up in a lot of our discussions, but that interesting dynamic of inexperience and experience and how you get to that place. And
Mhm.
I'm making a big kind of like gesture with my hands of like, I have experience. And that in some way is a kind of, I don't know, value judgment that you can make on yourself.
Well, it's both a value judgment you make on yourself, and I think one that is, at least in the West, is often, like,
Mhm.
set up as, we have, like, the virgin whore dichotomy, like, if you're a
Oh, for
woman, you're
sure.
either a virgin or you're a whore, uh, and it is interesting that, like, that the horror side of it does I need to stop saying that, but, like, that side of it doesn't come up. I don't like I also don't support the idea that women who have had sex are whores, just, like, to
Oh, no, no,
be
no.
clear.
I don't think anybody took it that way. That's just the what is it, like the shorthand
Yeah,
for
it's the shorthand. Um,
a patriarchal view of women, let's just say.
mhm. But so first of all, that isn't the deal here. But
No, mm-mm.
I think the drama also does a lot of work to also further undermine that as a binary because one of the things that
Mm,
happens once Rinko and Kamisaka do have sex the first time is that she's like, wait, like, and she has like a line that the subtitles translated as like, with only one experience, what exactly will be different from being a virgin?
mhm, mhm.
Which I think was really interesting in practically undermining the like, hey, this isn't actually like you have sex one time and then you are a sex goddess. Like
Right.
there are like lots of things that like you still haven't done yet, or maybe don't know about or aren't comfortable with. And I think that was a really interesting thing to see.
Sure. And I think kind of building off of that, she has sex by the end of episode 2.
Yeah, so for some context,
Oh, yeah, go
really
ahead.
quickly. So the way that Rinko and Kamisaka's relationship progresses
Mhm.
is Rinko finds out that Kamisaka, for people who haven't seen the drama, Rinko
Right.
finds out she happens to run into him at the bar. The bartender
Bar warm.
bar warm. The bartender spills that Kamisaka is a virgin who is still hung up on his ex, and in a very
Not his
no,
ex.
sorry, not his ex, his first crush love from high school, who was like
Mhm.
framed in an ex-ish kind of way, but like they never even like got off
Really?
the ground,
Ah,
I
I didn't
think.
take it that way, but go ahead.
Okay, that's totally fine. I'm not
No,
like
we can come back to that. I think it's
okay.
interesting, but go ahead.
But so the bartender tells Rinko that Kamisaka is a virgin. Rinko is trying to lose her virginity, and her criteria essentially is to find someone to sleep with who won't laugh at her or judge her for being a virgin, and then also won't gossip
Mhm.
about it. And she's like, ding, 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 Kamisaka, also a virgin, therefore will not judge me or laugh at me or tell anybody
Yep.
about it because he's in the same
Mhm.
boat.
Mhm.
So she drags him to a love motel and is like, let's have sex, let's do it. And then gets very nervous and is like, I am also a virgin. I am not ready. And then they make an agreement to meet the next week to have
Yes.
sex, and then that turns into a friends with benefits relationship
Yep.
where they like agree to like keep sleeping with each other on Tuesdays, Rinko's day off, until they are quote like comfortable enough to stand on their own 2 feet. So that's the
Right.
setup for people who have not seen the drama.
Right. Their mutual deflowering agreement is the first one, and then
Yes.
the second agreement is like until agreement until we can both all stand on our own 2 feet or something like that, or
Hmm.
support ourselves or something of that nature. Oh, we were talking about wrinkle and virginity, right?
And how
So
she has sex pretty early.
yeah, so she has sex pretty early. It's episode 2.
Hmm.
So even though it's kind of like the premise is almost set up as Wrinkle wants to lose her virginity, that's what we're going to be talking about. It very quickly shifts away from that,
Hmm.
which I think kind of begs the bigger question of like how do we think of sexual experience, but also how do we think of sexual experiences in a
Hmm.
sense because they do show us both Rinko and Kamisaka losing their virginity, right? But then we
Hmm.
also get, I want to say, at least 2 more
Because
sequences of them,
there's the bath
maybe 3.
one, and then I think two at his house.
Yeah, yeah. So we get 3 more instances of them having sex. We get to see the growth of their sexual relationship and how their interactions with each other change. So it's kind of like an interesting way of depicting them gaining experience on the screen, uh,
Hmm.
which which I think might be a useful thing to kind of think about. Perhaps not right now, because I think we're focused on virginity right now. We might want to come back to that. So, what do we think about Rinko's first time? Even though that's not like the thing that the is the linchpin of the entire show, I do think it's the first time we see a sexual interaction, right? And I
Hmm.
think it sets up a lot of the dynamic between Rinko and Kamisaka. And when I
Hmm.
say the first time, I mean like yes, the first time they have sex, but also that initial kind of meeting where she's pretending like she has all this experience and
The first
stuff.
time when they don't have sex.
Right, exactly. So what are your kind of reactions to that? What are things that jumped out at you?
So, two thoughts. The first is that it is interesting the way that Rinko, while she is very, very confident and knows exactly what she's doing in every other aspect of her life, when she
Mhm.
and Kamisaka are like getting it on, she becomes a lot more sort of passive and unsure. I'm not sure if
Yeah.
passive is exactly what I mean, but
I don't think it's the wrong word, but I'll explain what I mean. Go ahead.
okay. But like she becomes a lot more just unsure of what she's doing, which is a really, really interesting contrast. And she also sort of
Mhm.
lets out a much more cute side when she's with
Mhm.
Kamisaka. Once she starts getting like a little bit more comfortable, and even like sort of acknowledging her discomfort allows her to be, I mean, they frame it as like very cute that she like is sort of like uncomfortable and unsure and like
Mhm.
self-conscious. But like the being those things doesn't make her unattractive, I should say.
Right. Mhm.
Uh
Mhm.
and then the second thing is that the first time that she does end up having sex with Kamisaka, it doesn't seem that pleasurable, I guess.
Mm-mm. Mm-mm.
Like it doesn't seem like, I don't wanna go so far as to say that it's like, it's certainly not like assaulty or anything like that,
No, 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 no,
but it
no.
is kind of like uncomfortable a little bit, like, and not super sexy.
Yeah. Yeah. So, something I think is interesting, kind of building off both of those points, is that Kamisaka is really the I don't wanna say he's aggressor, but he takes the lead. He really takes the lead in both of these circumstances, which I think is interesting because 'cause they're both supposed to be inexperienced virgins, right? That
Mhm.
Kamisaka hasn't the way it's set up, the what information we get, Kamisaka has been hung up on his high school love and has not had experiences since then. So it was very interesting to me that Kamisaka is the one who is taking the lead. He's the one that's taking off his shirt and unhooking Rinko's bra and is kind of making the advances and moving forward and is the one who caresses her face and is like, if it hurts, tell me and I can stop for you. Like it's very much
Mhm.
he projects a kind of experience that I don't necessarily think that he has, which I thought was kind of
Mhm.
interesting. But I think part of that is because of who probably the target audience of the show is for, right? I'm thinking, and you are welcome to disagree with me here, but I think based on the fact that the manga that the show is based on was for like women, it was a josei manga. I think the audience here is expected to be younger women, women in their 20s, 30s, 40s, going on from there.
Could you define josei manga really quick?
Sure, of course. So, a lot of people who are familiar with manga probably have heard of shonen and shoujo manga. Shonen manga are mangas that are targeted, and I use targeted very specifically towards like boys and young men, whereas shoujo manga is targeted towards younger women and girls. Subsequently, there's also seinen and josei manga, which are targeted towards older audiences. So they take on themes that are more, I don't want to say more advanced, but that's what I'm going to say, more advanced, perhaps more violent, more sexual, etc. So seinen stories are more for older men, and then josei stories are targeted towards older women. So
And
if
by
folks
older,
know
you mean like 20s and 30s?
20s and 30s, yeah.
Okay.
But it doesn't mean that anyone can enjoy these stories. Like I love a good shonen story. I Shoujo stories make me cry all the time. So like it's more who the specific target demographic is.
Oh, yeah, the actual audience can always vary from the target
Right.
demographic.
Exactly. Exactly. And Rinko-san Wants to Try, from looking at it, was more of a josei manga, so targeted towards women, older women. And so I assume that that would be kind of like the expected carryover for this version of Rinko as well.
Mhm.
And I think there's a bit of a sense of like Rinko takes on a bit more passive role, I think. Like the first time they're together, she kind of goes limp in a sense because there's a sense of letting someone take charge that can sometimes appear, I think, in josei stories.
Yeah, specifically to set the scene, like, she goes limp specifically when he unhooks her bra,
Yeah.
because I think that's a
Well,
moment of
when he picks her up in a hug. When he picks her up in a hug, she's limp,
mm,
and then he goes and hooks her bra. So it's the moment that he like throws his arms
okay.
around her that she kind of reacts by going limp.
Mhm.
There's,
Okay,
like, a
yeah.
deliberate lack of control, I think that happens. And
Mhm.
I can throw, not to talk about this for too long, but I can throw an article in the chat that I read that was about it was about pornography, but it's about, pornography targeted towards women and how they're in a lot of older stories, there was this kind of lack of control that allowed, and I'm putting quotes around this, but allowed women to like truly be their sexual selves. So I think we might be seeing like some threads of that here. But
Mhm.
yeah. But shoot, I was gonna say something else about their actual first time. Oh, yeah. The fact that you're saying that it didn't seem like Rinko-san really enjoyed it, I 110% agree. And at first, I think that made me I kind of felt a little bit of dissonance because I think the music and the lighting and the way that the camera was blurry was setting it up as being this very kind of like romantic thing. But then
Mhm.
she seemed to not be having the best. I think she actually cried, if
Yeah,
I
so, like,
remember
so
correctly.
to set the scene a little
Yeah.
bit, so they're at the Love Motel. It's the second time they've met there. Rinko has turned down getting dinner with her crush because she gets super self-conscious about, like, not being ready to have sex with him. So she
Mhm.
ends up
Mhm.
keeping the date with, Kamisaka to have sex, and she spends 20 minutes talking about ground rules. She's very big on rules, which is something I appreciate because she likes to set expectations.
Yeah, including no kinky stuff. He cannot ask for kinky
No
stuff.
no kinky stuff. And another thing that the first time I watched it that I was like, okay, girl, whatever, is she like sets the rule that like no kissing, because quote, that's something she only does with her boyfriend, who is imaginary. She doesn't have a boyfriend. And the
He
first time I
doesn't have
watched
a
it, I was like,
boyfriend.
what is this? Pretty woman? Like, what are you doing, Rinko?
She was definitely playing a role in that one. She was like, "This is what experienced, mature ladies say." She's ridiculous. I love it. Please continue.
But yeah, so they for like 20 minutes she's like on the bed, like sitting on her so like kneeling, like sitting on her feet, wearing
Mhm.
this white dress with her hair kind of like in waves instead of very straight, which sort of like
It was a very
softened.
cute look.
It was a very cute, like romantic kind of look. Uh,
Mhm.
and she's clearly procrastinating. The moment when they like finally have sex and Kamisaka's like, okay, I get it, you are repeating yourself at this point. And that is when he like takes the lead. And then she, I think also when does she take off her dress or does he take off her dress?
I think he takes off her dress.
And she's immediately kind of self-conscious about her body, uh
Yes, she covers up. Mhm.
and about like
With her arms.
revealing that. And at that point she is still wearing like her bra and her underwear, so like
Mhm.
she isn't like naked. And I will also say this drama, it isn't as explicit as like Hit the Spot. Like we don't
No.
see,
Mm-mm.
we know when they have sex, but we don't, like, for example, know when they have an orgasm or that kind of
Right.
thing. And we
Mhm.
don't see the same kind of nudity that like
Right.
we saw in Hit the Spot. So while
Mhm.
being kind of explicit, I don't think it crosses the line into like necessarily being pornographic. What would you say, Ayani?
I wouldn't call it softcore. I think it's very yeah, they're very careful. A lot of things are more hidden. I wonder if that's has to do with how it was aired,
Mm-hmm.
like on network television versus being web because Hit the Spot was a web drama, if I remember correctly. And I
Yeah,
think
and
Rinko-san was
Rinko-san
on
is not a
TV.
web drama. Mhm.
Yeah.
So,
Ringo-san was aired on TV. So there's different rules and stuff like that.
yeah. Yeah, so keeping that in mind, they have that moment, and then there's sort of a time jump where we see their clothes on the floor, and then they're both covered in the sheet, and Kamisaka is on top, and Rinko-san she has very big eyes. Like, that actress had, like,
Yes.
huge eyes, and she's very wide-eyed and looked kind of nervous, and he's on top and is like, "Does it hurt? Are you okay?" I don't remember exactly what he says, but then has that, like, line of, like, if it's too much, like, I can stop. And then
Mhm.
they have sex. She maybe, like, she doesn't cry, but her eyes do sort of, like, well up a little bit,
Mhm.
almost like she's overwhelmed, I think.
Mhm.
Not more than that she's, like, I don't know, maybe she is, like, a little bit uncomfortable.
Yeah. I kind of took it to be like symbolic of putting quote unquote the pain of having sex for the first time because they
Yeah.
weren't going to show that.
Mhm.
But I think they kind of wanted cuz pain came up, you know what I mean? I think
Mhm.
they kind of wanted to nod to the fact that perhaps this was not the most pleasurable for her.
Mhm. So and then they have sex, and then we like sort of cut again, and Kamisaka is sitting on a chair smoking, and she is lying on the bed under the sheet like, I am not a virgin anymore. Huh. Wild. uh but like it is, I think, very interesting that in a drama of this kind, that the first time isn't that sexy. It is kind of something that
Mhm.
like they have to get through almost
Hmm. Hmm.
in order to be able to like I don't know, actually get to a point where they like enjoy having sex with each other.
Though I will say, I think Kamisaka is set up as being attractive and desirable and sexy in the sequence in a way that Rinko is not.
Okay, yeah, I'll buy that.
Yeah, because there's the fuzzy light, he's bare chested, he talks softly, there's the romantic music. So he's kind of set up in contrast to Rinko's anxiousness or nervousness. Let's do nervousness. It feels like they're almost in two different scenes. I know it's a scene together. I'm not trying to say it was badly put together, but it like there's a split in how they're being viewed, and I think that's on purpose.
I do so I kinda wanna fast forward a little bit to think about so in
Sure.
episode 7, we get Kamisaka's point of view, like, it goes back through a
Mm,
lot of the
mhm,
pivotal
mhm,
events of the drama, and in the version where we see essentially Rinko's perspective on their first time, he does seem, like, very sort of in control and like he knows what he's doing.
mhm.
Did that did that get revised for you at all when we saw that sequence from his point of view?
So, while I really did appreciate the sequence from his point of view, I liked seeing his mindset. The line that stands out to me is, and it's not a direct quote, but pretty much he said, "When I see that someone else is more nervous than me, that allows me to not be nervous anymore." So the fact that Rinko
Mhm,
was nervous enabled him to be able to be forward and kind of take control. So
mhm,
it didn't change how I viewed it, especially since I think we as audience members are supposed to be viewing him in a particular kind of way. I did appreciate kind of seeing the more cute internal monologue for him when he was
mhm,
sitting over there smoking and thinking about the fact that he wasn't a virgin anymore, but not in the sequence itself for me. Did it change
mhm.
for you though? It sounds like it might have.
Well, one of the lines from when he's, like, thinking back on it, I think, and when he's smoking afterward, is that, like, he doesn't really remember it because he was just sort of
Mm,
frantic to get through it, which I
mhm.
think maybe made him seem a little bit more human, maybe, and that, like, maybe
Mm,
he didn't
mhm,
know
mhm.
exactly what he was doing, and while he did also, like, have this maybe front of being, like, confident, he also was just kind of like, "Okay, like, the only way out is through," a little bit.
What a choice of words there, Corinne, but
Don't
alright.
don't look at don't poke at that too closely.
Oh, boy. No, I see what you're saying, though, and I don't disagree. I think they wanted to kind of give that contextualization that, he was also nervous, and he was also figuring out, I guess, his body and her body at the same time. But
Mhm,
that makes me actually wanna slide into slide into thinking about the conversation that's happening between first love and your first time
mhm,
in the show, because while for Rinko, Kamisaka is her first time, and also I don't get the sense that, like, she's had big love relationships before based on her
mhm,
conversations with Sonoko. I feel like Kamisaka becomes her first love in a sense, but
mhm.
Rinko is not Kamisaka's first love.
I do before we get into Kamisaka, who we learn a lot more about, I do wanna note that I think it's interesting that we never Rinko's romantic past is kind of left as a blank slate for us. Like, we don't even know if
Mm,
she's really kissed anybody before or if she's had any
right.
crushes on any like, that none of that is addressed. She
Mhm.
certainly doesn't have anyone she's hung up on now, and we know she hasn't had sex. We don't know if she's done anything else because I do wanna, like, note that in real life, there is, like not everyone who hasn't had sex has, like, never had any, like,
Oh, no,
romantic
for
relationships of
sure.
any kind.
I'm just thinking about her conversations with Sonoko though, and like
Mhm.
when they go to the group date with her and then another younger person. I get the sense that Rinko is even inexperienced in that regard. Like Sonoko
Yeah,
seems a
that
little
she
bit
hasn't
like
really dated. That seems true.
the fact that like I only kiss my boyfriend was what she decided to say to Kamisaka. You know, I I get the sense that it's not just sexual inexperience, but more romantic experience largely. Not that she's never had crushes before, but I
Mhm.
it doesn't seem like based on context clues that she's had a boyfriend,
Yeah. Okay.
you know?
But it is, I think, interesting that we are assuming that and it is never said
No, I
explicitly.
agree. I agree. I agree. Yeah, that's really interesting. I'm glad you brought that up, actually, because it was something that I just kind of assumed, but you're right. It's never explicitly said that she has no romantic experience. I think Sonoko was just very frank with her about things, and I was like, yeah, I feel like they've had conversations about stuff like this before.
Mhm.
This feels like a familiar kind of thing for them. But what I was getting to is that Kamisaka's first love factors in majorly in kind of like what the second act of this drama.
Mhm.
So Shiho appears at their wedding planning agency because she's getting ready to, or she's been proposed to by a doctor, and they've got to plan their wedding. So Rinko recognizes her name from when from when our meddling bartender was talking all about Kamisaka's first love, and is desperate to keep Shiho from running into Kamisaka. Of course, they run into each other when Shiho is trying on a wedding dress because of course that's what happens. But
Mhm.
then it starts this whole movement of Rinko making assumptions about Kamisaka and Shiho's relationship. Of course, there has to be trials and tribulations in any rom-com, but Shiho kind of becomes the crux of that. Not to dodge talking about it, because I think I have Shiho is an interesting character for me because I feel like she did some really annoying things that, because we're getting it from Rinko's perspective, I perhaps am more annoyed by. Like, sh
Mhm.
she shows up at Kamisaka's house one night, and I'm like, "Girl, you haven't seen this man in 10 years, and you're just gonna show up at his house crying? Okay." But, I wanted to throw it to you. What are some of your thoughts? Because I know we have talked on this show at length about how we feel about first loves coming and, like, fucking everything up. It's very annoying. But what
Mhm.
are your reactions to how Rinko-san Wants to Try handles the first love?
So I think it's very interesting in how it handles the first love thing because it is told to us and to Rinko that the reason Kamisaka
Mhm.
hasn't had sex and is also still a virgin at, I don't know, I think he's also like 27, is because he is hung up on this girl he had a
Mhm,
huge
mhm.
crush on in high school. And the first, and there's like that trope of like your first love you will love forever, you will never get over them, and if you are ever in competition with a first love you will lose because that is the ultimate love situation. But but
Sorry, the
like
way
the
you said,
and
"You will lose." Sorry, continue.
but like the drama is specifically putting Rinko and Kamisaka's first time relationship in contrast with and sort of in battle almost with this like
Hmm,
first romantic first love situation. So it's
hmm.
kind of like which kind of first love will win and also which first love is more legitimate or stronger.
Oh, that's so interesting. Yeah, I think legitimate is an interesting word to use here too, because one of the things that keeps coming up is the difference between like childish love and adult love.
Mhm.
Our bartender had a quote. I think this was episode 7, right? Because
Mhm.
that was the one from Kamisaka's perspective. But adult love is heavy, painful, and a hassle, as opposed to the light fluffiness, of childhood love of your high school crush or whatever. So it's almost like a juxtaposition of not just the first love, but of like the difference between a first childish love and a first adult love,
Mhm.
because Rinko's friend Sonoko also says, she kind of like congratulates her on having her first adult love relationship.
Mhm. I do want to note it is a very funny scene when Sonoko does that because she, like, gets her a fruit tart with a candle on it and has her, like, blow out the candle, like, "Congrats, you're not a virgin anymore. You did it."
Yeah, no, that was a good scene. That was a good scene. So it's kind of like Kamisaka's first love perhaps doesn't win, but they are also each other's first adult love, and that lends it a kind
Mhm.
of legitimacy as far as the drama is concerned.
Mhm.
It's interesting too because Sonoko tries to manage Rinko's expectations about the
Mhm.
relationship and be like, just because you have sex doesn't mean that, you're going to get married one day, paraphrasing, right? And that it's risky to fall in love with the first person that you have sex with.
Mhm.
You know, now that makes me want to ask you a question because
Mhm.
like I don't think Sonoko is set up as being a naysayer or being very negative. Um,
Mhm.
but where the drama ultimately ends up is very different than the expectations that she was trying to set. So how do we feel about like, and I know this isn't on our outline, but the role that Sonoko is playing as kind of like the truth teller realist?
I mean, I think that and it's interesting there because she's right, and it's almost like she,
Yes.
as the snarky bestie, both exists in the rom-com world, but also, like, exists with one foot in the real world in a kind of
Mhm.
way,
Mhm.
because
Mhm.
the moment where I was like, "Oh, I like her, she's funny," is after Rinko and, Kamisaka have the agreement to, keep having sex until they can stand on their own two feet, and Rinko is like, "This is such a good idea, I'm gonna get all the experience that I need, this is so great." Sonoko is like, "So you're friends with benefits then?" Like, that's what that means. And Rinko's like, "No, I would never." And Sonoko's like, "But that's what it is,
But you
though."
are. But you are though.
So it's almost like she takes off the glossy veneer a little bit of, like, rom-com
Mhm.
expectations of a friends with benefits situation
Mhm.
to
Mhm.
almost remind viewers and Rinko that, like, this isn't necessarily how, like, this turns out all the time.
Mhm. 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 So she's almost like a teeny tiny bit of didacticism in the middle of your rom-com fantasyness.
Yeah, I don't know if I'd go so far as to call it didacticism so much as just like a reality reminder person.
A reality check. Yeah.
Yeah, a reality check. That's a phrase that exists
I
as
mean,
opposed to
reality
real.
reminder is like alliterative, so I support it. Okay. Okay. Yeah. What's also interesting is that the show sets us up to or the show wants us, I believe, to root for the friends with benefits to get together. So
Mhm.
even though we have Hiyama-san who is handsome and has a good career and is talented and really likes Rinko, you know, he doesn't really stand a chance, right? And
No.
we kind of know this coming in. And even though Shiho is set up as being like kind and sweet and beautiful, she's just in the way. No
Mhm.
one's rooting for her to get with Kamisaka. She is purposely set up to be in the way and do all of the things to make Rinko feel self-conscious. Like, okay, I had a point, but real quick, I just want to fuss about this. So, at one point in the narrative, Rinko and Sonoko are at the bar having a drink and talking about her relationship with Kamisaka and how Shiho showed up and how cute she is and all that kind of stuff. And then Shiho and Kamisaka come into the same bar because, of
There's only one
course,
bar in the city, clearly.
there's only one
But
bar
also they are the
in
only
all
people
of
who go to the
Tokyo.
bar
Right?
because they're the only people we ever see at the bar.
Ever, ever, ever. But they kind of have this conversation in which Rinko is obviously not being true to her feelings. And it comes to the point where they're kind of joking that this is Shiho's last date before she's a married woman. And I'm like, ma'am, you have a whole fiance. Why are you joking about going on a last date with a man that you haven't seen in 10 years? And holding up
Mhm.
on his arm and is like, "Will you be my last date, Kamisaka-kun?" I don't know, it was trifling to me. That seemed like some trifling behavior. Like, I don't know. Like, I would have not, when I'm planning my wedding, go hug up on one of my guy friends and being
Yeah,
like,
it's not
"Will
like
you be my last date?"
it's not like you get a hall pass for, like, your high school crush right before you get married.
Right, like, what? And I know there's some context that like her marriage or her fiance and her were on the rocks or whatever. Not on the rocks, but we're having a difficult time. But I was just like, wow, you kind of trifling. Everyone's like, oh, she's a sweet girl. And I'm like, but she hugging up on some man in a bar while she's planning for her wedding. I don't know. I ain't like her. However, what was my point? I got mad about She-Ho and
I
then I
think your
got
point was that
distracted.
you don't like Shiho.
No, no, we were actually, like, leading up to something, and then I got mad about Shio. Friends with benefits, friends with benefits.
Ah.
We're set up to root for the friends with benefits to get together,
Mhm.
and while I was on board for this, I wanted them to be happy. I think it's an interesting kind of trope to think about, right? Because there are plenty of stories about friends with benefits. Like there was literally a movie, years ago called Friends with Benefits, right? Was that the one with
Mhm.
Mila Kunis and Justin Timberlake?
Yeah, there
I
were,
don't
like,
remember.
2 that came out at the same time that were, like, the same
Yeah.
story. No
Yeah, one
Strings
was Friends with
Attached
Benefits.
and Friends with Benefits, I think.
Didn't No Strings Attached just come out? Isn't that a new one?
I thought that was
I
one
don't
with,
know.
like anyway, it is a long time
Doesn't matter.
trope.
Yeah. So the question that we were kind of boiling over in our brains is I'm going to use the word should, right? But should we be rooting for friends with benefits to get together? Are we convinced by these kinds of stories? And how would we feel if like the friends with benefits didn't get together? Is that the kind of story that we'd want to see?
So, I was rooting for them to get together and also knew they would get together because of the genre that we are in.
Sure,
But
sure,
I
sure,
also
sure.
think I would have been if this was a different genre where this was allowed, I also think I maybe would have been also fine if they didn't get together because the other
Mhm.
drama that this made me kind of want to go back and watch is actually the K-drama Nevertheless, where the
Ah,
female lead in
okay.
that one has a friend benefit situation. And in that one, sorry, spoilers for Nevertheless, but they get together at the end. And in that one, I really, really wanted them to not end up together. Like, I
Mhm.
deeply wanted that because it was a horrible idea. Uh,
Uh-huh.
but the reason in Nevertheless why I didn't want them to end up together is because the male lead was a fuckboy.
Mhm.
And then they set up the story to suggest that he changed to suddenly not being a fuckboy anymore.
Yeah, okay.
Uh yeah. It would have been a better drama if they hadn't ended up together. But I think in Rinko-san, Rinko and Kamisaka isn't a fuckboy, I guess.
No. Mm-mm.
Like they both when they have this sexual relationship with the agreement that they are just having sex and not developing
Mhm.
feelings, which was a lie.
Totally worked for them.
I think I believed this setup that they were both more of their quote unquote true selves when they were together,
Mm. Mhm.
particularly more than they were at work, where they both have like a very effective facade of being like a very efficient, very good,
Mhm.
very
Mhm.
solid worker who is
Right.
good at their jobs and also like have this like illusion of perfection that
Right. Mhm.
that screen went down for both of them when they were together and like developing this
Mhm.
sexual relationship and like allowed themselves to be more vulnerable.
Yeah, yeah. I think we were set up to see both of them as at the core of it good people.
Mhm.
Uh and particularly Kamisaka as more than just friends with benefits material, right?
Mhm.
And there's quotes around material.
Well, I mean, like, it was super cute and nice, like, when he wanted to, like, cuddle afterward, like, when she came to his house
Mhm.
to have sex, as opposed to going to the motel for the first time, and when he, like,
Right.
gave her a toothbrush and was like, "Yeah, like, I'll keep it, like, you'll be back, right?"
Mhm. I think I texted you and was like,
"Oh, yeah."
That's coupley stuff right there. You don't leave a toothbrush at your fuck buddy's house." But
I don't know, maybe you do.
maybe you do. What do I
If
know?
it's
I
like
don't know
a
what the youths do.
I was about to say something real racy, and now I'm gonna say it, but with the acknowledgement that it's racy, but if it's like a repeat customer, then you
She's a repeat customer. Okay, Corinne.
I don't know, you gotta go, like actually, I mean, when you have a toothbrush, that suggests that you'll still be there in the morning and that you sleep there and not that
Right.
you, like, go
Mhm.
home after the deed is done.
Right, exactly, exactly. There is a sense of, attachment, continuation in leaving a
Mhm.
toothbrush at somebody's house. Where are we going with this? I got so distracted by you saying repeat customer. Oh, rooting for the friends. Yeah, so Kamisaka is set up
Yeah.
as someone you'd want to have your toothbrush at their house, right?
Mhm.
Which also, I guess, implies that he's not bringing other people in to brush their teeth. So yeah, the story does its work to make you interested and invested in them getting together, but I do think it's a good trope to interrogate, especially when we think of, you know, real life situations. You know what I mean? Sometimes you just are friends
Mhm.
with benefits with somebody, and that's what it ends up being. It doesn't mean you then have to get married, which is also the implication at the end of this show is that they love each other and one day they will walk down the aisle. That ever straight line to marriage being the final goal.
Ugh,
If
yeah,
you can't
that
hear my
fake wedding at the
sarcasm, it's
end.
there.
Yeah, the so for people who haven't seen it, the drama ends with, like, a fake wedding situation, and, like, Kamisaka has them like, "Oh, you can just think of this as rehearsal for the real thing." It's like, absolutely not.
Boo. Boo to that. I was on board with everything but that. Also, it's very weird. So, it feels like in the context of the show, and I don't know much about, like, the marriage industrial complex in Japan, right? But this felt like a one-stop shop where you get a dress, and I part of me feels like it's dress rental, but I don't know.
Mhm.
You get a dress, you can plan your destination wedding, you can pick your location, like, they do all of that stuff for you, get your photos done, etcetera, etcetera, etcetera. But it was funny because at the start of the episode, in which also at this point, Rinko has decided to date Hiyama-san and let Kamisaka go because she thinks that he's with Shio, which, like, I'm gonna leave that one alone. But
Okay, so for slightly more context, we have the 2 competing love triangles with Rinko,
oh, yes,
Hiyama,
yes,
and
yes, yes.
Kamisaka, and then the love triangle with Rinko, Kamisaka, and Shiho, and they both
Yes.
think that the other person romantically likes the other person more, so that causes tension. She essentially breaks it off with,
Because nobody can talk about their feelings.
well, that's because they agreed in the rules not to have feelings.
I'm just shaking my head. Continue.
I mean, I agree. They both should have, like, talked about their feelings, but also, like, talking about your feelings is hard.
Yes, but I feel like assuming that he is getting with his fia a woman who already has a fiance is even harder. She did that to herself. But it's fine. Anyhow, the point is they have both made the decision separately that the other one is in love with the other member of the love triangle. However, they're at a staff meeting with all of the people who are part of this wedding planning industry or wedding planning company, and their boss is like, we're gonna do a fake wedding for promo, but instead of hiring actors to do this, we're just gonna
Models.
use some models. Instead of hiring models to do this, we're just gonna use some of our staff because they're hot, so this is fine. And I
And
was
when
like,
I
who
saw
is
that, I was like, modeling is, like, a skill. It's not like a thing that hot people can just do.
and also your boss being like, "Yeah, we've got some hot people. Hey, you two hotties, come take these photos." This is really weird. I'd be very uncomfortable if this was like my office. Like, even if I wasn't involved, I'm like, you shouldn't be talking about my colleagues in this way. It's very bizarre. But yeah, so like while I normally do love the, oh my goodness, I've seen my love interest in a wedding dress because she's trying it on for some reason. Maybe for crime, maybe for something. I love the
Yes.
trope.
Shout out to extraordinary attorney Wu.
Yeah. Oh, big shout out to that one. That's exactly what I was thinking of. You read my mind. The it was kind of weird the whole wedding tie-in for this one with the fake wedding, but yeah, I can leave that there. I can leave that there. I think we've talked about a lot of the things that rose to the surface for us with
Mhm.
Rinko San with the show. But are there any kind of last lingering thoughts that you have about it that we didn't touch on? Something that you want to make sure we talk about before we close out?
I do think it's an interesting sort of addition almost to like I have in my head, and I've seen a lot more K-dramas than I have J-dramas. Like I'm not very
Mhm.
familiar with like the Japanese drama situation, but I do have like a list of dramas in my head that feature or focus on like a main female lead who is like late 20s, like around 30, and is in this position of like
Mhm.
not having been in a romantic relationship or like not having had sex and being like concerned about
Mhm.
that. And I think that is something that I know that I have seen more commonly in East Asian media than I have in American media.
Hmm.
So the one that I'm thinking of specifically is Because This Is My First Life.
Mm. That was such a good drama.
And I think that is an interesting concern to have and to
Hmm.
and I also okay, this is where I'm going with this, is that even though Rinko is very, very concerned about still being a virgin at 27, I don't actually think that she is being condemned by that or condemned for that
No.
by the
Mm-mm.
drama in any significant way. Instead, the drama is like taking pains to be like to make Rinko seem like a lot more normal and human, and this just being like a thing that like happens and is fine.
Mhm, mhm. I think what it does is it takes her concerns seriously without
Yeah.
it being, like, a catastrophic kind of, like it takes her seriously without being like, "Yes, this is an actual problem."
Yeah, it takes her seriously without confirming it as, like, a real character flaw.
Right, exactly, exactly. And I think that's a great strength of the drama, that it does
Mhm.
that it's able to kind of walk that line. Yeah, I think we can say we enjoyed Rinko-san Wants to Try. We're glad that she tried and got in all of her attempts. Um
And also, like, we spent a lot of time talking about how, like, vaguely uncomfortable her first time was. The additional times were much sexier.
Oh, yes, indeed, and she definitely gets more and more into it with each time.
Mhm.
I think the final time we see them have sex, when they're holding each other and it's
Mhm.
very sweaty or is that the final time? Or is the last time when they're well, there's a time where they're holding each other and they're upright and they're really sweaty and it was very hot, and the lighting was, like, blue and red. It was very interesting. It's a very well done scene, but Wrinkle-san
Mhm.
has a good time. She has a good time.
Well, and it is a contribution to the growing canon. So thinking about like when we talked about sex education, of acknowledging sex as a learned skill and not just like a switch that you can flip
Mm.
on, I think it
Mhm.
was contributing to that.
Yeah, that's a really smart way to kinda close us out here. If you take anything away from our episodes, folks, it's that sex is a learned skill. You get better.
I was not expecting that to be like the thing that came out of our podcast.
No, I'm kidding. I'm totally joking. I mean, I'm joking, but also it's not inaccurate. But I'm joking. I'm joking. So
You're joking, but also like not joking.
yeah,
That's real
S-
though.
it's real, but also I'm kidding. But it's real. So, so what do we have coming up in the future, and which is the far flung future from us in this moment for sex love literature?
Yeah, so two episodes that we have coming up that, sometimes we're liars, so we don't know when they'll come out. But we are planning to do an episode on the excellent Chinese drama Lost You Forever, part one,
Mm,
that I
mhm.
have successfully bullied Ayanni into watching. I am so excited to talk about it. And as a branch out from that may actually come out before the Lost You Forever episode, depending on the timing. We are thinking about doing a Halloween special episode with a trope spotlight on demon love interests.
Yes, I'm very excited about that one. We'll probably re-recording the Demon Lover one maybe shortly before this episode comes out. So, if all goes according to plan, I hope you all are very excited for that one. As excited as I am in this very moment. And I'm also looking forward to talking about Lost You Forever. I think I'm only what? I think I just watched episode 10.
Mhm.
So, my feelings are formulating, but we'll see where they are by the time I finish this, I guess this run of the
Mhm.
drama.
Yes, and Lost You Forever I think has it's been long enough that I think I can comfortably say that it is now officially my top C drama.
Ooh, well, that means you all should really look forward to our conversation because Corinne has not steered me wrong when it comes to C dramas yet. You know, it's gonna be hard to follow up Love Between Fairy and Devil, but we'll see. We'll see where this goes. If you want to make sure you know when these episodes go live and to get other fun behind the scenes tidbits about us and about sex love literature, we actually just did a really fun one, which I guess would be a month ago at this point, on who people are gazing at for our female gaze episode, which was a lot of fun. You can follow us on Instagram at sexlovelit, all one word. We are also technically on Twitter and Threads, but for the most juicy content, you can follow us on Instagram. Thank you so much for listening to our episode on Rinko-San Wants to Try. We look forward to seeing you for future episodes, and we'll see you next time.
Yeah, happy October.
Oh, happy October. Bye, y'all.
Bye.